For as long as I can remember, Resident Evil has always been a part of my childhood. When I was 4 years old, I used to watch my brother play Resident Evil 4 on the PlayStation 2, and I absolutely loved it. As I got older, I played through a bunch of Resident Evils on my own, and I have a lot of memories attached to the games. So it's been really refreshing to see the series making a comeback in recent years with Resident Evil 7 and Village. However, despite the resurgence of the games, the movies are still lackluster. When Resident Evil Welcome to Raccoon City came out this past November, I went to watch it with my friends and we knew what we were getting into, but that still didn't stop from being any less cheesy or boring. So today I'm going to discuss why Resident Evil and video game movies as a whole just suck. The main reason why video game movies suck is plain and simple. It's because video game movies are stuck in the molds of their games. Video game movies bear the titles of their games, and it naturally becomes an obligation for them to serve the game's fanbase. This is the issue with video game movies. They are too afraid to do new things, add new characters, do new storylines, because they have a set precedent and expectation that they have to meet. The newest Resident Evil movie suffers from this as it tries to conform its plot to integrate the stories of the first two games, and as a result it tries to squeeze in moments of fan service wherever it can and the plot gets convoluted. An example of this, and spoiler alert for this movie, although spoilers for this movie really don't make a difference, would be in the final fight when Leon just pulls a rocket launcher out of literally nowhere in the train to finish off Birkin. The train door just opens and there's Leon with the rocket launcher. Plot convenience is annoying, but this is just so blatant, and I get that's trying to go off the games, and I've played them, but in the games it did have some explanations for how the rocket launcher came into play. The movie is not by any means meant to be well thought out, and I get that, but the bigger point that I'm trying to make here is that video game movies like this one suffer from trying to mimic their video game inspirations directly. Now before we dive any deeper, I want to make it explicitly clear that I am not a Resident Evil hater. I'm a really big fan of the Resident Evil games. I've played 1 through 7 and I haven't gotten around to playing Village yet because my computer can't run it, but eventually I really want to play Village too. The connection that I have with the games just makes the movies all the more frustrating because I do think there is potential to make a good movie within the Resident Evil universe, but it just needs a more original approach that focuses on making a good movie first rather than making a good video game movie, and there is a difference. This brings me to my next point, and that's that not every single great video game can make a great movie and vice versa. Looking at Resident Evil 2, you spend a lot of the game running around a police station looting and killing zombies. There are barely any characters, and while Resident Evil as a universe is not bad for a movie, you need characters and plot points to keep the audiences invested in the story. Showing repeated zombie action like with what takes place in the vast majority of Resident Evil games would not do much for an audience. An example of this balance would be in Train to Busan, which deals with the zombie trope in a refreshing way because it has characters with various motivations and philosophies, and while there is a lot of action, there are some plot points sprinkled here and there to keep us invested in the plot. Resident Evil Welcome to Raccoon City does not have this because it tries to take its plot points from a game that isn't meant to be made into a movie. Video game movies should not be afraid to break out of the mold and try something new, and they can do so while maintaining their video game universes so they can retain that marketability, which is undoubtedly the leading reason behind making a video game movie in the first place. It sucks because there are so many video game universes that can be made into movies without having to take direct storylines from their games and trying to squeeze it into a movie. An example of these universes would be Silent Hill. Now many would say that Silent Hill is one of the better video game movies, but it commits the same mistake that I've been talking about, and that it copies its games and tries to fit the games within a movie without trying something new. Even though on the video game movie scale the Silent Hill movie is not too bad, this goes back to my previous point in there being a difference between what we call a good movie and a good video game movie. The bar for being a good video game movie is much lower than being a good movie, and I doubt anyone can name a video game adaptation to the big screen that you actually think is a good movie. But the reason I'm drawing attention to Silent Hill is because its universe is the one that I personally feel has the most untapped potential in terms of making a video game into a movie. But remember, as I mentioned earlier, that not every single great video game can make a great movie, and an example of this would be Silent Hill 2. Silent Hill 2 is one of the greatest, if not the greatest, plots within a video game. We might think to ourselves that if a video game plot is so good, then it could undoubtedly be made into a movie, but this isn't the case for Silent Hill 2, as its atmosphere, which is really established for running around the town alone, could not be emulated in a movie because it would just be boring to watch. Some movies can pull off storylines with limited characters, but it's extremely tough, and I think I speak for all of us when I say that having a lone character doing abandoned urban exploring would be uninteresting. If a Silent Hill 2 movie were to be made, then the base plot would need alteration so that it could fit the big screen in order to keep audiences interested while also not having a dull movie. A Silent Hill 2 movie could have the same twist that the game has, which I won't spoil here, definitely play the game if you haven't already, while adding in some other plot points or characters so that it has its own identity. This is what any video game movie should do. They should adapt their storylines better and have some originality. It would be perfectly fine to start from scratch for a lot of video game movies by having their own storylines that stay within the universe, and they can integrate some Easter eggs here and there if need be. Video game movies should be an extension to the universe, not a copy of it. Obviously, the level of accommodations that would be needed to adapt a game into a movie would vary and it would be a case-by-case basis, but nonetheless these changes would need to be considered. This is the bigger issue that plagues Resident Evil, as it tries to copy the success of its games into film, but this doesn't work. Resident Evil needs to branch off and do stories which are meant for film, not stories that were intended for games and then repurposed for film. Obviously, some care has to be put into the screenplay, as some of the previous Resident Evil films that have tried to diverge still suffer from careless writing and overused tropes. Overall, the video game industry needs to understand that in order to make their games into movies, they need to prioritize having a proper, competent movie first, and then they can have the additional aspects like Easter eggs and references that tie back to the game. A great game does not make a solid movie. A movie's quality is based on its own properties, and movies should have their own identities. At the end of the day, the only thing that is stopping studios from making video game franchises into successful films is their refusal to take risks and to have a movie be different on its own. If you guys enjoyed this video, then please consider liking. A lot of time goes into making these videos, so any of your support is really appreciated. Also, please comment your thoughts down below, and if you have a topic you want me to cover, then also please mention that in the comments. Once again, thank you so much for watching, and I genuinely hope that you have a great rest of your day.